Marc Serber alongside Charles Boehm, and for those of you who are kind enough to go to SoccerWire.com, we have an extended version of our weekly podcast for you, as this is something that I really never wanted to have to talk about, never even thought I'd see the day that we would talk about this. But Charles, today is the 2-year anniversary of the USA losing to Trinidad and failing to qualify for the 2018 World Cup, and it has to be asked, has U.S. soccer made any progress since that fateful night?
Kuva, the one word that is infused with so much meaning, so much pain and anguish for fans of the men's national team programs. And here we are 2 years down the line. There has been some interesting discussions on social media today. Have we progressed? Have we lifted ourselves off that floor that was experienced on that muggy night in Trinidad? My answer, honestly, is I don't know. I feel like this program hit a low and then treaded water for a year. And it's perhaps a whole other discussion to get into the process of how Greg Berhalter was selected as national team coach. But it was not a transparent process. It's not clear why it took a year of caretaker leadership from Dave Sarachan, who, to his credit, did his best to try and set the program on a course for renovation and revitalization by bringing in a bunch of young kids and trying to play as many meaningful matches as they could. But the bottom line is that I can't really answer this question comprehensively because we haven't progressed. We've been treading water for most of the past 2 years. We're finally on the doorstep of some meaningful qualification now. We had Gold Cup this past summer. The U.S. had a respectable, if not dazzling, performance in that tournament. Now this week, CONCACAF Nations League begins. There's some meaningful games, meaningful away games. I mean, Berhalter's been in charge for almost a year, and he hasn't played an away match effectively, much less in a competitive environment. And then World Cup qualifying is, I think, less than a year out now, or thereabouts. The reality of the CONCACAF format is that the U.S. has effectively been guaranteed a place in the hexagonal in the top 6 because they're going to base it on FIFA rankings. And I don't see how the U.S. can drop from second-ranked team in CONCACAF down out of the top 6 no matter what happens. However, we're still left wondering what is it going to look like? What will it be like? And there's a lot of noise here with the fan base being as frustrated and as prone to negativity as they are, but that's not their fault entirely. The federation and the leadership and the players and the coaches have to give everyone a reason to feel good, to feel optimistic. There's been a few flashes here and there, but I can't blame fans who are still frustrated, almost as angry as they were 2 years ago.
I don't think I've really seen the change at the top, like you said, as we just don't really know. But where I see the changes, and I'm going to be totally transparent here, I call matches for the U.S. Soccer Development Academy. So I'm obviously in an interesting position here. But what I really do see there is I see coaches getting better. I see players at 13 seeing tactics that we never discussed even after I was 18 as a kid growing up here in the U.S. I see the youth teams doing very well. I see progression in the World Cups, and I see a lot more kids going to Europe earlier. And I really think that the answer of whether we progressed or not from that fateful night 2 years ago is maybe 5 to 10 years down the line and not necessarily here. I see the glimpses of hope and what you said, Dave Sarachan, bringing in the younger kids and getting them those minutes and showing them what it really takes. But I see the hope in our U20s and our U23s. Now let's see if they make the Olympics, more so than I actually see that hope at the very top at the moment.
Well, that's good, and I'm a glass half full type person as well, and I try not to dwell in the problems and the frustrations and the negativity. I think that the Federation's presidential election back in February of 2018, if I'm remembering right, was a striking moment, and that's probably fueling a lot of the frustration that people on the half-empty side feel, because the people that make the decisions, that cast votes, that go to the meetings, that take part in the operations of the Federation and its member bodies, chose conservatism. They chose to stay the course. We had these opportunities to try something completely new at the top. And granted, the president is only one player in this big game and this big organization now. But there was a real chance to do something completely different and to really make a statement. And the voting members of the federation elected not to. They chose the vice president and promoted him. Maybe my hope is that the next presidential election and everyone after that going on into the future will be a robust debate of ideas and mentalities and leadership styles. That hopefully Carlos Cordero will have to defend his resume, his 4 years of leadership, and show what he's done and prove that he's taken us somewhere positive. There'll be a new CEO coming in at some point, probably I expect early next year. But this organization, I think, showed its conservatism, and that is, there's probably some good aspects, some bad aspects to that, but it's a little bit of a Rorschach test, I think, for the rank and file out there.
When you look at the results on the field, I mean, how much can we really learn from this Nations League coming up? Because the bottom line is that we're expected to get to the final. Anything less is a failure. Then there comes the game against Mexico, which I think is the beginning of that litmus test. But for me, the real thing is, it used to be we go to Honduras, we go to El Salvador. Sure, those games are going to be tough. The fans are going to do everything to just make it a dreadful experience for our players. But we were expecting to walk away. 1 point was a disaster. 3 points is what was expected. Can we get back to a level coming into qualification where we take those points that we were expected to take? But other than that being kind of the beginning of the litmus test, what can we actually learn from matches against the likes of Cuba, and I'm sorry to our friends to the North, Canada as well?
I'm watching these two Canada matches closely because you have to find, when you're a prisoner of geography, the way that the U.S. is, unfortunately, or simply it is what it is, as they love to say in this business. You have to find competition and challenges where you can get it. Right now, Canada is on the up in a way that the U.S. isn't. There's a very different tenor and tone around that country and its programs. Now, they've got some organizational shortcomings, and that's led to them being chronic underachievers going back 2-3 decades now. But they've got a really bright young crop of players. They're benefiting from their new domestic league, the CPL, from more and more players in MLS. I think we should want Canada to be a strong program and a strong competitor on our borders and really cultivate that rivalry. So I'm looking forward to playing them in these two home and away CNL games. They're competitive. I mean, these count for caps. These count for FIFA record purposes. Like, here's the test. And yeah, people will flip out if we don't get positive results against Canada. But that's the reality here. They have to beat what's in front of them and do it with as much style and sophistication as they can, and then do it again and again and again. And I think that's a big factor in why I detected such a sort of business-like, almost grim attitude around MNT training this week in Fairfax.
I was just about to end this segment, but then you said two buzzwords that really got under my skin: style and sophistication. Everybody is calling for style and sophistication. We try to turn the program into that, and we've lost our grittiness and our resilience that made us the U.S. men's national team. How important is it to fans over the next few years that we get these results with, quote-unquote, style and sophistication?
I think it's important, too. This is Chris, by the way.
Yeah, Chris Hummer, founder of SoccerWire.
It's totally fine.
Apologize.
Yeah, I wanted to recast the question to close the segment, but you made me, you talked about the results of the youth, what you've seen in the Development Academy. And for me, the question that popped into my head when you said that was, we're talking about culture versus management of results in a sense. So you have all the politics of U.S. soccer. You have who hires the coaches, who the coaches are, what new positions that we make. At the end of the day, how important is it really if they're putting the money into the programs, giving the kids opportunities to play? Personally, success is probably not going to come with the World Cup for us until we have a generational cultural shift of kids that grew up loving the game. And NBC's promotion of the Premier League is probably going to be directly correlated from that. I think the kids you're seeing now at 13 and 14 that are playing smart tactical soccer in the development academies, those kids don't remember a time when they couldn't wake up Saturday mornings and watch some of the best soccer in the world and have an MLS team in their backyard to go see too. So that's for me, that was my comment. But I would reframe the big question of this segment of have we made progress? Would it be any different had we won that game and gone to Russia, even if we went out in the group stage? Would anything be different than it is today had that happened? So if it has or hasn't, I'll throw that out to you guys.
Once again, I think the way Charles started by saying the answer is we don't know is because the kids that they bought in were so young that we're not going to know until about 5 to 10 years down the line when players like Josh Sargent are in their prime and joined by other players who grew up with the soccer culture that you're talking about coming out of the development academy. And so for me, the way I see it is that the thing that losing did do was it took out the players that were a part of the generation that obviously wasn't performing, and we bought in these young players who are getting the experience but aren't quite ready to fill that gap that's left in that vacuum. And so they need a bit more time to spend in that vacuum before that question can be answered. But the answer is that the Josh Sargent, when he gets to his prime, and the players he has around him with a little bit older Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, all those guys in their mid to late 20s, early 30s, are they getting the job done? Then we circle back and answer your question. Charles?
Yeah, Greg Berhalter's always going to be playing from behind. He's always going to be playing catch-up because he can only work with what he has. He can select players. He can try and send messages with the style of soccer he tries to play, with the people he calls in, the games he goes to watch and is seen watching and so forth. But he's dealing with the products of the pyramid beneath him. So he wants to play proactive, possession-oriented soccer, use the ball to disorganize defenses. He has it very down pat. He rattles it off now almost by memory, I'm sure. But if the culture starting from U10 and up isn't absorbing that lesson, isn't putting those tactics and concepts and philosophies into practice from when these kids are first getting into the game at a competitive level, you're always playing from behind the eight ball. I don't see that. You guys, we've been out to games, right? Yeah, you can find good soccer here and there. Is it across the board? Do parents understand it? Is our culture fostering that style and that proactivity, that comfort on the ball, all the advanced tactical understanding? I don't think we're where we should be, even when you look at the Development Academy 12 years down the road, MLS 25 years down the road. Our culture is moving so much slower than all this organizational infrastructure stuff we do. And this is an old U.S. soccer story. I mean, my cautionary tale, my lesson from Cuba is that this federation has this idea, our leaders have this idea that we can hire the right coach. If we just pay the right coach enough, we get a whiz kid in here, or we get a genius coach, or these steps that we think can jump ahead, right? We make these great leaps forward with some kind of organizational magic trick. And I think that's kind of been debunked.
So the bottom line is there really is no magic bullet, and we really need to start from the bottom, continue to work on changing that culture and bring it forward. For my money, that culture is there. I think one of the great things that Development Academy coaches really do, especially with the younger kids, is teaching them, look, if you want to be a pro, if you want to be on the national team someday, then you are going to have a certain mentality. And that mentality is going to be a grind day in, day out, and it's going to take a ton of sacrifices. For me, the argument is that right now there's the gap between the players that understand that and the players that had retired right before this disaster. And so therefore we're going to have to wait a couple years for the gap to close. I think for you feel like that gap should have already been closed, and it's still an issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue.
Look, let's try and cultivate good soccer wherever we can, and call out the bad coaches who play bad soccer, who make bad selections, who have a negative influence on the game, whether it's whatever level it's at. Obviously, we need less yelling on the sidelines on Saturday mornings and so forth. But let's name names. Let's be a little bit more assertive about what we see that's working and that's positive and what's not. And
the great place to do that, well, it's called Twitter. Charles, thank you so much for your time.
SoccerWire.com, right?
Chris Hummer, thank you so much for your time. And if you want to yell at us, especially with compliments, hit us up at the SoccerWire. But for now, we'll end with a moment of silence for Cuba.